Welcome to Shatter.
The apartment was too quiet for a night that was supposed to end well. Late evening, city light leaking through the windows, the muted hum of traffic far below. We had just come back from the corporate dinner. Polite smiles, measured laughter, people congratulating us like we were still a unit. Now we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the space between us wider than it looked. Claire didn't take off her coat. She dropped into the chair, phone already in her hand, thumb moving with practiced speed. Notifications stacked, disappeared, reappeared. Her face softened in ways I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. I watched her for a few seconds longer than necessary. Then I spoke, quietly, not accusing, not emotional. I said that I missed when we actually looked at each other. She didn't look up. There was a brief curve of her mouth, not quite a smile. More like the expression she used in meetings when someone asked a question she'd already dismissed. Her fingers kept typing. I saw the reflection of the screen in the window, someone else's name at the top. She answered the way she did at work. Flat. Efficient. Like she was setting expectations. She said results mattered. That intimacy was a discussion for later. That first she needed to see progress in other areas. The words landed cleanly. No raised voice. No drama. Just a sentence delivered like a KPI. A notification chimed. She paused, lifted one wireless earbud, and slipped it in. A voice message. I didn't hear the words, only the tone. Her posture shifted. Her shoulders relaxed. She smiled. Not at me, not at the room, but at whatever was coming through that tiny piece of plastic. I stopped talking. Something compressed in my chest, sharp and contained, like a system error you don't fix right away because you need to understand the scope first. My face stayed neutral. Years of boardrooms had taught me how to keep it that way. She nodded once, still listening, still elsewhere. I stood up. No announcement. No explanation. The chair barely made a sound against the floor. She didn't notice. I walked down the short hallway and into my home office. The room smelled faintly of electronics and old coffee. Familiar. Controlled. I closed the door carefully, making sure it didn't click. On the other side of the door, her voice floated once, then faded. That was the moment something shifted. Not loudly. Not in a way anyone else could point to later. Just a quiet fracture. And I understood, without needing to name it yet, that whatever we had been calling a marriage was no longer a shared space. It was just a structure I had been maintaining alone. The door stayed closed. Morning came without a transition. No argument. No resolution. Just the soft mechanics of another day starting as if nothing had shifted the night before. I stepped into the kitchen while the coffee machine warmed up, the apartment still dim, the air carrying the faint scent of cleaning spray. Carol was already there. She had worked for us for 8 years, long enough to know the rhythms of the apartment, long enough to know when not to speak. She wiped the table slowly, methodically, as if time wasn't pressing her the way it pressed everyone else. She reached the edge of the table and paused. For a second too long. A receipt lay there, half folded, placed neatly near my side of the table. White paper against dark stone. 2 lattes. Same blend Claire preferred. The date was from 2 days earlier. The time was just after 2 in the afternoon. I didn't need to check my calendar. I already knew what had been scheduled then. A blocked slot. Marked private. A candidate interview she'd told me not to interrupt. Carol didn't say anything. She didn't look at me directly either. But her eyes lifted just enough to meet mine for a brief moment, then dropped back to the table. I took out my phone and photographed the receipt. No hesitation. No reaction on my face. Then I folded it exactly the way it had been and placed it back where she'd left it. Carol nodded once and moved on to the counter. That was it. No confrontation. No questions. Just data added to a file I hadn't realized I was already building. That evening, Claire walked past me in the hallway, shrugging off her coat. Something followed her that didn't belong in our apartment. Heavy. Wooded. Sharp. It lingered after she'd moved on. It wasn't the perfume I'd bought her last Christmas. That one was soft, familiar, almost forgettable now. This one announced itself. She noticed my glance and explained without stopping. A gift from her team, she said. A celebration of a strong quarter. I nodded. Opened my laptop. Let the screen light my face instead of whatever expression might have surfaced otherwise. She went back to her phone, fingers moving fast, smiling again at something that wasn't in the room. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Later, alone in my office, I logged into the internal system. Not as a husband looking for reassurance. As an architect noticing irregular traffic, small inconsistencies, patterns that didn't align with the stated design. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt yet. I was focused. And somewhere between lines of code and access logs, something else settled in quietly. I stopped waiting to be told the truth. I didn't approach it like betrayal. That would have been sloppy. Emotional. I treated it the way I treated every system I'd ever built, by looking for anomalies first, then tracing their origin. Late at night, after Claire fell asleep with her phone still glowing on the nightstand, I sat in my office and pulled 3 months of internal access logs. No alerts had been triggered. Nothing obvious. Which was the first thing that bothered me. Claire's badge activity was clean on the surface. So was Derek's. Individually, they looked normal. Together, they didn't. I started lining them up. Exit times, entry points, elevators, parking gates. Patterns emerged fast once I stopped pretending they wouldn't. 11 instances in 8 weeks. Always close together. 3 to 5 minutes apart. Never simultaneous. Always during lunch hours or late afternoons. Enough distance to look coincidental. Close enough to be intentional. I cross-checked calendars. Both of them had those time slots blocked the same way. Out of office. No client names. No follow-up notes. No deliverables attached. That alone was against protocol, but no one enforced protocol on people who were considered essential. I kept going. Expense reports next. Derek's, specifically. He was careful, not reckless. But repetition betrays everyone eventually. The same parking structure. The same business hotel on the east side. Not one we used for partners. Not one close to clients. 8 charges over 3 months. 2 to 3 hours each time. I didn't zoom in on details longer than necessary. I didn't imagine scenes. I didn't fill in gaps. I saved everything exactly as it was. Encrypted folder. Offline copy. Time-stamped. I closed the laptop and sat back. The room was silent except for the low hum of the server rack. Familiar. Reliable. Unlike the woman asleep down the hall. The next evening, Claire laughed out loud at something on her screen. A real laugh. The kind that bent her forward slightly, made her forget where she was. I was standing across the room, watching her reflection in the dark TV screen. She didn't notice me watching. She never did anymore. I realized then that the distance hadn't started recently. It had just become visible, like a crack that finally reaches the surface. I didn't confront her. I didn't adjust my tone. I didn't pull away yet. I watched. I listened. I noted timing, posture, the way she angled her phone away from me without thinking. That night, as she slept, I understood something with absolute clarity. I didn't recognize the woman in my house. And more importantly, she had no idea that I already knew exactly who she was when she thought no one was looking. I gave myself 48 hours. Not to decide what I felt, but to remove friction. Emotion complicates execution. Systems don't. I started with the smallest things first. The things people never notice until they're gone. Shared subscriptions. Cloud storage. Streaming profiles. I changed passwords quietly, one by one, logging out of every device that wasn't mine. Netflix first. Then Spotify. Then the shared photo drive where our lives had been reduced to folders and timestamps. I didn't delete anything. I just closed access. Next came the cards. I removed Claire from the automatic payments tied to the household accounts. Utilities stayed active. Rent stayed covered. Everything was technically correct. It looked like optimization, not punishment. I left the group chats without announcements. The ones labeled family, friends, weekend plans. No dramatic exits. Just absence. On the business side, I moved faster. Derek's name came off 2 strategic projects by morning. The justification was clean. Load balancing. Risk mitigation. No one questioned it because the explanation made sense and because it came from me, not HR. I reassigned access permissions. Limited his visibility. Nothing aggressive. Just enough to slow momentum. By noon, I packed a small bag. Not a getaway. Just a relocation. I told no one where I was going. Claire was in the shower when I left. Steam under the bathroom door. Music playing from her phone. Someone else's playlist. I drove 3 neighborhoods over and checked into the office apartment I kept for late nights. Minimal furniture. Neutral colors. Silence. I set my phone to deliver messages without read receipts. Status indicators off. Location sharing disabled. The first message came an hour later. Where are you? I didn't open it. The call followed. I declined it and replied with 2 words. Busy. Later. That was enough to shift the balance. Not panic yet. Just disruption. By evening, she tried Derek. I knew because I had already sent him out of town that morning, citing an urgent regional client issue. He wouldn't answer her either. Not because he didn't want to. Because he couldn't. I sat alone on the couch, lights off, city noise bleeding through the windows. I wasn't hiding. I was simply no longer available. Claire didn't know where I was. She didn't know what I knew. And for the first time in years, she couldn't control the narrative by speaking first. That night, another message came through. Shorter. Sharper. Are you ignoring me? I let it sit. This wasn't revenge. It was recalibration. I didn't disappear. I just stopped being reachable in the way she had taken for granted. I didn't confront Derek. That would have turned it into something personal, something emotional. I kept it procedural. The audit was already on the calendar. Investors liked audits. They liked the illusion of transparency. I made one call and moved the date forward. Framed it as preparation for expansion. No one objected. The external firm came in quiet and efficient. No drama. No assumptions. Just requests for documentation and time-stamped records. I didn't feed them anything they couldn't find themselves. I simply didn't block the paths I had once designed to be overlooked. Derek tried to look relaxed during the first review meeting. He always did. Confident posture. Easy tone. But the cadence was off. He knew something was wrong before he knew what it was. The findings weren't explosive. That was the point. Personal expenses filed as corporate representation. Hotels that didn't align with client lists. Parking fees attached to no meetings. Small numbers. Repeated often enough to matter. When the auditors presented, I stayed silent. Took notes. Asked no questions. Derek spoke when prompted. Explained that the meetings were exploratory. Potential partners. Early-stage conversations that didn't always materialize. I waited. Then I asked for follow-up documentation. Contacts. Summaries. Outcomes. Nothing aggressive. Just process. There was a pause. Too long. He said he'd have to gather the information. The room shifted. Not loudly. Subtly. People started making eye contact with the table instead of each other. No one accused him of anything. They didn't have to. The absence of evidence spoke clearly enough. By the end of the meeting, the decision was framed as temporary restructuring. Derek was reassigned to project-based work. No budget authority. No strategic oversight. It sounded benign. Inside the company, it translated instantly. Demotion. I didn't look at him when it happened. Later that afternoon, I walked through the office floor. Conversations dipped when I passed. Not out of fear. Out of recalibration. People were adjusting their understanding of where influence actually lived. Claire hadn't connected any of it yet. Not fully. That evening, she sent another message. Longer this time. Frustration leaking through the words. I read it without responding. She still thought this was about us. About distance. About miscommunication. She didn't see the larger structure collapsing because it wasn't collapsing loudly. It was being dismantled quietly, piece by piece, by the same hands that had built it. Derek avoided my eyes the next day. Not because he hated me. Because he knew I hadn't done anything illegal. Or unethical. I had simply stopped protecting him. And in this system, that was enough. Claire broke the silence herself. Not with a question, but with a joke. She posted it late afternoon, between meetings. A casual story. Coffee cup in frame, soft lighting, the kind she curated carefully. The caption made light of someone complaining about affection, framed it like immaturity, like noise. It read playful on the surface, dismissive underneath. The reactions came fast. Emojis. Laughing faces. Familiar names. People who worked with us. People who had been in our apartment. I saw it without opening the app. Notifications travel even when you don't invite them. 2 days later, the tone shifted. Sarah reached out to Claire first. She was married to one of my partners, careful by nature. Her message wasn't accusatory, just cautious. A suggestion that jokes about spouses land differently when timing changes. A reminder that people notice patterns, not captions. Claire brushed it off. She always did. Control came naturally to her when she believed she had context. At lunch, Ashley mentioned seeing me across town at a tech conference. Said I looked lighter. Not distracted. Present. She said it without meaning anything by it. Claire stiffened. She asked which conference. Ashley hesitated, then named it. The pause said more than the words. That evening, Claire tried to access the shared photo drive. Denied. She refreshed. Tried again. Still nothing. She opened Netflix. Her profile was gone. Then she called. I answered on the third ring. My voice was even. Unhurried. She asked what was going on. I said nothing was going on. I said I was simplifying things. There was a pause on the line. Not silence. Processing. She asked when I was coming back. I said we'd talk when I was back. And I ended the call. For the first time since we'd been married, I didn't offer an explanation. I didn't soften the edges. I didn't manage her reaction for her. At work, the atmosphere around Claire shifted in ways that couldn't be documented. Conversations ended when she entered rooms. People responded politely, formally. The warmth she was used to had cooled. She noticed. She just didn't know why. Derek stopped responding to her messages entirely. When she approached him in person, he deflected. Said he had his own issues to deal with. He didn't look at her when he said it. That night, alone in the apartment, she scrolled through comments on her story again. The laughter was still there, but something else had appeared beneath it. Distance. And for the first time, it wasn't something she had chosen. Claire began to lose her footing quietly, not in a way that invited sympathy. In the way people do when the systems they rely on stop responding the way they're used to. At work, her calendar filled as usual, but the tone of the meetings shifted. Conversations stayed strictly professional. The HR assistant who used to linger in her doorway now sent emails instead. Short, precise, no side comments, no shared looks. When Claire asked questions in meetings, answers came slower. Not delayed enough to complain about, just enough to notice. Derek became a closed door. Messages went unanswered. When he did reply, it was clipped. Work-related only. No warmth. No subtext. When she tried to corner him in the hallway, he deflected without stopping. Said it wasn't a good time. Said he had his own problems. She didn't press him. She couldn't afford to. That evening, I came back to the apartment later than usual. I didn't announce myself. I didn't look for her. I moved through the space like a guest. She was waiting. She tried to start a conversation about us. About distance. About how we needed to talk things through. Her voice carried urgency now, the kind that arrives after control slips. I listened without reacting. Then I told her I needed to check something first. I opened my laptop at the kitchen counter. Utility bills had come in. I mentioned casually that I'd removed the auto pay. Asked if she could handle it. The question landed harder than anything else I could have said. She asked why I hadn't warned her. I told her I assumed she'd notice. That she was good at noticing things that mattered to her. I didn't look at her when I said it. She stood there, hands braced on the counter, searching for something to push back against. There was nothing. No accusation. No anger. Just absence. I took my laptop and walked into the office. Closed the door behind me. Not sharply. Just firmly. From the other side, I heard her pacing. The sound of drawers opening and closing. The subtle signs of someone trying to regain orientation. She didn't knock. She sat alone in the living room for a long time that night. Long enough for the city noise to thin out. Long enough for the silence to stop feeling temporary. What unsettled her most wasn't that I was pulling away. It was that I wasn't reacting. I wasn't negotiating. I wasn't pleading. I wasn't even angry. I had built a wall without announcing it. And for the first time, she didn't know where the door was. She cornered me the next morning in the kitchen. Not dramatically. Just by standing where I couldn't walk past her without acknowledging it. The early light was flat, unforgiving. Coffee brewed between us like a neutral witness. She demanded to know what was happening. Not gently this time. The control in her voice had cracked, replaced by urgency sharpened into anger. I didn't rush my movements. I poured coffee, set the mug down, took a breath. I told her I wasn't avoiding her. I said I was prioritizing differently now. That was when she lost patience. She said this wasn't me. She said I was the one who used to talk things through, who wanted to fix things, who pushed for closeness when she pulled away. I looked at her then. Really looked. For the first time in weeks. She was standing close, but already reaching. Grasping for something that wasn't there anymore. I told her that she was right. I said I did those things. Past tense. The word landed between us and stayed there. She reached for my hand instinctively, like muscle memory. I stepped back. Not abruptly. Just enough to break the motion. I asked her not to. That was when her voice shifted again. Confusion layered over panic. She said she didn't understand what she'd done wrong. I told her that was the problem. that she didn't see it, and that I was too tired to explain it anymore. The kitchen felt smaller then, the walls closer. She asked if there was someone else. The question wasn't accusation. It was fear. I told her no. I said there was no one. Not even her. I took my coffee and walked past her. Down the hall. Into the office. I closed the door. On the other side, I heard her breathing change. Faster. Shallow. The sound of someone realizing the ground they'd been standing on wasn't solid anymore. She didn't follow me this time. Later that day, messages came through. Long ones. Apologies mixed with frustration. Attempts to reframe what had happened. To minimize it. To reset the conversation to a place where she still had leverage. I didn't respond. What she didn't understand yet was that this wasn't a phase. Or a tactic. I hadn't pulled away to be chased. I had already stepped out of the dynamic entirely. And the silence she was hearing wasn't punishment. It was absence. The collapse didn't arrive all at once. It spread the way structural failures do, quietly, predictably, until there was nothing left to stabilize. Derek's reassignment became official by the end of the week. Remote status. Project-based. No access to budgets. No authority over strategy. It wasn't framed as punishment, but everyone understood what it meant. In this company, visibility was currency. He had lost it. The rumors filled the vacuum quickly. Internal audit. Expense irregularities. Ethics review. People connected the timing without needing confirmation. They remembered lunches that ran long. Departures that aligned too neatly. Absences that had once been ignored. Claire felt it before she could articulate it. At the next board meeting, she sat straighter than usual. Spoke carefully. When the discussion turned to internal oversight, one of the directors asked her, directly, how HR had missed repeated policy violations. The tone was neutral. The implication wasn't. She explained process. Cited safeguards. Used the language she'd perfected over years. No one interrupted her. No one defended her either. I sat beside her and made notes. Didn't look up. Didn't step in. Not because I couldn't. Because it wasn't my role anymore. When the meeting adjourned, she called my name as I gathered my things. Her voice caught slightly. Just enough to notice. I told her I had another meeting. I didn't slow down. That evening, she came home to an apartment that felt unfamiliar. Too much empty space. The absence of weight. My clothes were gone. My laptop. Personal documents. Things you don't notice until they're missing. On the table, I'd left the keys to the office apartment. Beside them, a note. Brief. Neutral. I said I'd be staying there for now. I suggested we keep things professional. She stood there for a long time holding the keys. Not moving. Not crying yet. The messages started later. Questions first. Then accusations. Then apologies. The pattern was familiar. The difference was that this time, there was no response to anchor to. At work, people stopped looping her in on informal conversations. Decisions happened without her input. She wasn't excluded. She was bypassed. The control she'd relied on, the social leverage, the certainty of my presence, the assumption of stability, had evaporated. I wasn't watching her fall. I was already elsewhere. And the hardest part for her wasn't losing me. It was realizing that I hadn't left in anger. I had left with clarity. She came late, past midnight, when the building had settled into that hollow quiet where every sound feels exposed. I knew it was her before the intercom buzzed again. She always pressed it twice when she was nervous, like the first attempt didn't count. I waited a full minute before opening the door remotely. She stood in the hallway under fluorescent light, coat half-buttoned, hair pulled back without care. The confidence she wore so easily in public hadn't followed her here. She looked smaller. Not physically. Structurally. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. Didn't invite her in. She started talking immediately. About mistakes. About stress. About how things had blurred and she hadn't realized how far they'd gone. The words came fast, overlapping, trying to rebuild something before it finished collapsing. I listened without interrupting. She said she could change. That she would. That she was already trying. That we could fix this if I just stopped pulling away. I asked her who the change was for. The question stopped her. Not because she didn't understand it. Because she did. She said my name the way people do when they're asking for mercy without saying the word. I told her I knew she hadn't set out to hurt me. I said that was the problem. That she hadn't noticed at all. That I'd spent years asking for presence and getting efficiency instead. That I'd been treated like a task that could be postponed indefinitely. She reached for my hand. I didn't move away. I just didn't close the distance either. I told her I hadn't disappeared. I told her I'd simply stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. There was nothing left to add after that. I stepped back and closed the door. Slowly. No force. No final gesture. Just a clean, deliberate motion. On the other side, she didn't knock again. I stood there for a moment after the lock engaged, listening to the absence she'd been trying to outrun. By morning, the city would move on. So would the company. So would she, eventually. I poured coffee and opened my laptop. Notifications waited. Decisions needed attention. Systems continued to function. The difference now was that I wasn't maintaining something that had already failed. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindicated. I was finished. And for the first time in a long while, the silence around me didn't feel empty. It felt stable. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.